encourage your soul, enlighten your mind, and empower your faith. This is the Light Network.
Hello, and thanks for joining us on the Book Club today. My name is Brad McNutt, and I'm the host of this podcast dedicated to reviewing and recommending many helpful books about the heavenly book that God has given to us. We're excited that you have joined us today. We're currently in the final phase of our cycle. Of course, on the show, we always begin with the canon. We're looking at a book of the Bible that God has given to us. We look at a classic work and then a contemporary, and now we're moving toward the cutting edge, one that's been written within the last 18 to 24 months. Those are the basic parameters, that is the limits, roughly 2 years or so. And so the book we want to think about today is entitled The Book of Daniel, Explorations in Christian Scripture by Ed Gallagher, and it was published in 2024. And so as we think about this book, we want to begin, first of all, obviously, as we always do with the person thinking about Dr. Ed Gallagher. Of course, he is a part of our Light Network family. He hosts Inside the Scholar's Study, and you can catch it on Wednesdays is when it is released. But let's think more about him, his background, his education, and his work. And so his education, he received a BA and MA from Freed-Hardeman University, and then went on to receive an MPhil and PhD from Hebrew Union in Cincinnati. Since his time there, he has served as professor of Christian Scripture at Heritage Christian University for, I think he told me the other day, this is his 20th year there, and he has written a number of books, and this book in particular is the fourth in a series of books that he publishes through HCU Press. HCU is Heritage Christian University, where he is a professor, and it's called the Cypress Bible Study Series. And I know we have been through his book on Exodus before on the podcast, and I think maybe Luke, I'm not sure. But this one, and it looks like this if you're watching the video format, the Book of Daniel, Explorations in Christian Scripture, part of the Cypress Bible Study Series you see written across the top. And so he has in this series, again, the Book of Exodus, Explorations in Christian Theology, the Gospel of Luke, Explorations in Christian Scripture, and the Sermon on the Mount, Explorations in Christian Practice. And so as we think about that, then we move to the parts of the book, how it is composed. It follows the 12 chapters that you find in the book of Daniel. He just has a short synopsis of each one. Of course, chapter 1, vegetables and water, then the coming kingdom, in the fiery furnace, the madness of King Nebuchadnezzar, the writing on the wall, in the lion's den, the four beasts and the Son of Man, the God and the little horn, Daniel's prayer in the 70 weeks, angelic rulers caught in the middle, which deals, of course, with Daniel chapter 11, and then a new hope in Daniel chapter 12. And so those are just gives you a short synopsis of each individual chapter and some of the things to look forward to in them. Now, as we come to number 3, the perils of the book, things we might want to watch out for. This is a book, and this is an author, of course, that I know personally, a book that I have read. I even read some of the early notes of it. He shared some of the notes that he had prepared when he was teaching a class during COVID on this, and I was teaching Daniel here, and so I was able to see some of them early on. And then, of course, he developed it out much further for this book. But there are obviously no doctrinal perils in it. There may be some areas where you have disagreements about certain things along the way. I mean, Daniel is a book that it has its mysteries. It's one of those apocalyptic books. A lot of the things that go on in it and some of the images, there's just not absolute certainty with some of the things that go on there. So there may be some disagreements, but it's nothing major. It can be a really enjoyable book just to read casually, or one to help you in your preparation, whether you're preaching through Daniel or teaching through Daniel, or you're just studying through it and want to know more about it. I think it'll be very helpful to you. So let's think about this book. Why we believe it to be worthy of recommendation, the peaks of the book. First of all, as he begins in the introduction to the book, on the very first page of the introduction, he begins by telling us what the book of Daniel is about. He says, the book of Daniel gives instructions on how to live faithfully in a pagan world. Thus, it is a book for our time. The book encourages realism. Then he goes on to say, the book encourages perseverance. And then third, the book encourages hope. So it encourages realism, perseverance, and hope. So realism, your faith will conflict with the world around you. Perseverance, when the pagan empire tries to kill you, be faithful unto death. And the book encourages hope. One day God will turn everything upside down. And I love the way that I was immediately struck by that when I read it, because I thought it was a great, not only analysis of what the book is about, but also the practical outworkings of the book, of why a book that's written so many centuries ago, obviously being from God, but how it really translates to what we're dealing with. How do you interact in a culture that is hostile to your belief? And so I think he starts by framing it well, and he keeps that sense of practicality throughout the book. Now, as we fast forward to page 19, he has some interesting statements to say here. We're dealing in Daniel chapter 2 at this particular point with the image that Nebuchadnezzar has seen in the stone that was cut out of a mountain without hands that struck the image, and then it grew and became a mountain and filled the earth. He says this. He says, we should notice that Daniel 2:44 has not been literally fulfilled. The kingdoms of this world still persist. They have not all been turned into chaff, or been turned into chaff to be blown by the wind. Maybe you'll want to say that Rome, the fourth kingdom, has been destroyed, but I would respond that it took hundreds of years after the death of Jesus for Rome to be succeeded by other kingdoms. So either you think of Daniel 2:44 as only partially fulfilled as yet, or completely fulfilled in a not obvious way. Then he says, I myself favor the view that the outcome of Nebuchadnezzar's dream is not that kingdoms of this world will actually be destroyed by God's kingdom, but rather that they will be rendered irrelevant, at least irrelevant in a particular sense. They will be shown to be not the ultimate sources of power. We can already see that when the statue is still standing. Each kingdom gives way to the next, for they all stand on an unstable foundation. Only God's kingdom endures. Whereas the dream makes one think that God's kingdom succeeds and replaces all human kingdoms, we might actually look at it as if God's kingdom crushes the human kingdoms, in the sense that its simultaneous existence alongside the never-ending succession of human kingdoms shows that only God's kingdom is permanent. Think Matthew 16:18. And I think that's a wonderful perspective. Now, whether you agree fully with that conclusion, obviously that's totally up to you. But it is an interesting way of thinking about it. And it adds a different nuance and a different approach that I think can be very helpful, and that actually is very faithful to the text if you will stop and think about it and let it challenge maybe some of our preconceived notions concerning the book. For a third passage I want to share with you, I want to fast forward to pages 115 and 116 about Daniel's prayer. Of course, Daniel 9 is the 70 weeks. That small section at the end of Daniel 9 is perhaps the most difficult of all the things that you find in the book of Daniel. But of course, those 70 weeks in that prophecy is all predicated upon Daniel being in prayer to God and then the angel being sent to him. And Dr. Gallagher has this to say, beginning in a section he calls just that, Daniel's prayer. If Daniel had been looking at the letter that Jeremiah sent to the exiles, maybe we should imagine that Daniel was himself one of the recipients of this letter. This is talking about a letter that's contained in the book of Jeremiah. Jeremiah 29, I'm pretty sure, is where that letter is. It says, then he would have read the following words immediately after the prediction of the 70 years. So here's Jeremiah 29, 11 through 14. For surely I know the plans I have for you, says Yahweh, plans for your welfare and not for harm, to give you a future and hope. Then when you call upon me and come and pray to me, I will hear you. When you search for me, you will find me, if you seek me with all your heart. I will let you find me, says Yahweh, and I will restore your fortunes and gather you from all the nations and all the places where I have driven you, says Yahweh, and I will bring you back to the place from which I sent you into exile. The message essentially is, after 70 years in exile, if you seek me, I will restore you to your homeland. So Daniel seeks God. Why does Daniel pray? Most basically, he prays because that's what Jeremiah told the exiles to do in this situation. Remember also what Solomon prayed in 1 Kings 8, 46 to 53, and that's mentioned earlier in this book in chapter 6. That's when Solomon is dedicating the temple. He gives all different types of scenarios by which people may look to the um, by which primarily the Jews and also even Gentiles may look to the temple and pray. And thus, that's what Daniel may be doing here. He says, but also Daniel prays because he is calling on God to keep his promises. Not that he doubted that God would fulfill his promises, but as Jerome many centuries ago said many centuries ago, the certainty of God's promises did not render Daniel careless, but rather encouraged him to pray that God might, through his supplications, fulfill that which he had graciously promised. But Daniel prays also because he is not sure that the exile has lasted long enough to purify God's people of sin. And I think that's a wonderful perspective that it brings in when we think about this prayer and how do you handle the tension of all the things that are going on and all the different passages that are at work. Another thing I wanted to share with you, and those who are watching on YouTube, you'll be able obviously to see this. For those who are obviously listening to it, you're not going to be able to see this. And so you may not, but I'll try and describe it. It's nothing necessarily elaborate. It's just a simple chart of kings. But this is in Daniel chapter 11. Okay? In Daniel chapter 11, there is a whole bunch of discussion. This deals with a lot of things that would transpire in the intertestament, the intertestamental period. And we don't have kings mentioned by name. We don't have rulers mentioned by name or groups of people. You got the Ptolemies and the Seleucids and all the things and the back and forth and Antiochus the fourth Epiphanes and all of those things that are going on. And so when you're reading it and you're trying to examine what it's saying and look at a history book all at the same time and keep it all straight, I think you will find there is this chart on page 156 where he gives you proposed understandings for the person under discussion in each of those. And believe me, when you get in there and you try and parse all that out, you will be grateful for it. All right? I want to close by turning to page 167, short statement that he offers here about prophecy. He says, yet they seem to indicate that the Christian tradition concerning fulfilled prophecies going back to the New Testament does not press the details, but instead aligns the overall point of a prophecy with its fulfillment. Now, what he's talking about here really helps us to understand what he does in the entirety of the book, which is why I think it's a phenomenal companion for Daniel. So what can happen is this when you get to Daniel. A lot of, what shall we call it, fantastic predictions are made when people study the book of Daniel. And in response to those, others who are trying to refute that will try and offer different detailed explanations of the things that are going on so that they can refute some of the more elaborate explanations that exist. Okay, so in this book, his main emphasis is try and understand the message. Okay? Don't necessarily get lost in every one of the details. I mean, listen, there's certainly benefit in looking at every detail in Scripture. Nobody's arguing that. But don't miss the forest for the trees. Don't get so lost in trying to find every single detail that you miss the message being communicated, right? All the details added together produce a message that God is trying to communicate. Don't miss that. And that's one of the things that this book, I think, really offers the student of Daniel, is it helps you to see what the book is really about. Now, as we think about the place and price, Amazon is the place where we always link it. Of course, there are no connections, no revenue stream for me. It's just a simple place that almost everybody uses. And so we link it there at Amazon. The book itself, it's a paperback book, is $17.99, and you can get it on your Kindle for $14.99. And I think it would be a worthy investment for you. Again, just a hair under 200 pages, so not one that overwhelms you, and helps you to see the overall message and also gives you tremendous resources and information as always. And so I would encourage you to get the book. I think it'll be a great benefit to you. We certainly hope that this review has been beneficial to you and hope that you'll join us next week as we turn the corner once again and we go back to the canon and we're thinking about the book of Hebrews together. And we hope that you'll join us for that process. But until then, we want to always remind you that there are many helpful books that man has given to us, but there's only one heavenly book that God gave to us. And when we stick with that book, we never go wrong.